Motrolics.
Welcome to the 18th episode of the Cadillac Society Podcast, where we discuss the latest news, rumors, and anything else surrounding the iconic luxury marque. On today's episode, Cadillac is done with the XT4. I'm your host G, and joining us as always is Cadillac Society Executive Editor, Alexander Luft. New listeners keep on finding us, so I'd like to take a few moments to remind them where they can find all of our episodes. CadillacSociety.com/podcast is the place to watch, listen, and subscribe to this show. You can also find us in all popular podcatchers. And if you enjoy this show, please share it, tweet it, put it on Facebook, send a YouTube link to your friends. We want even more people to know about the Cadillac Society Podcast. Please say it ain't true.
Unfortunately, it's true. The XT4 is not yet done, but it will be done soon. So
is it done or is it going somewhere?
It will stay in China for a while until it's done there.
Oh, right.
But it's going to take a while for that to happen. What's interesting, though, is that this was not originally the plan for Cadillac or for GM. Here's some background. Currently, the XT4 is made at the Fairfax Plant in Kansas City. And it's shared throughout the years, this plant, with the Chevy Malibu. Both the Malibu and the XT4 are on the E2 platform, which essentially is the transverse engine kind of midsize-ish front-wheel drive biased or derived platform. Other vehicles that use it are the Buick Envision, and in the past, prior to their discontinuation, the Buick LaCrosse and the Buick Regal, and then all kinds of forms of the Buick Regal that were available internationally. So the Opel Insignia, the Vauxhall Insignia, the Holden Commodore, latest generation prior to its discontinuation. And I think that is about it. So that's the E2 platform. So the XT4 and the Malibu have shared the Fairfax plant in Kansas for years now. Really since 2019, which is when the XT4, 2019 model year, which is when the XT4 was introduced. And really, the plan was to discontinue the Malibu. So that we already knew. And in discontinuing the Malibu, it would have been replaced by the next generation Chevy Bolt EV, which is coming next year. And it was going to, again, go into the same plant. So the original plan, we actually have a quote here from GM from back in May of 2024. I'm going to read it out loud here. Quote, "Fairfax will produce both the Bolt EV and XT4 on the same assembly line, which gives GM flexibility to respond to changes in customer demand." End quote. So the plan was to produce Bolt EV next gen and the XT4 on the same line at Fairfax. That has now changed, apparently, with the plan to completely discontinue the XT4. Come January 2025, there will be no more XT4. And that is a very big change. A few interesting tidbits about this in general. So there is an EV replacement to the XT4. It's called the Cadillac Optiq. It is, it will slot below the Lyriq in the Cadillac EV portfolio. And that model will be assembled in Mexico, not at Fairfax. Okay. Well, then I guess really the question is, does the Optiq have what it takes to take over for the XT4? That's the first question. The second question is, why? That's my number one question. Because the XT4, all right, yeah, it was introduced for the 2019 model year, so it ran 2019, 20, 21, 22, and 23. So 5 model years, and then it got a refresh for the 2024 model year. And that refresh it's actually a very handsome refresh. Essentially, it consisted of changes to the front fascia, where it adopted Cadillac's newfound front fascia, and the really an overhaul of the cockpit, where it got that very beautiful 33-inch curved screen, along with whatever changes that were necessary to the center stack as part of that adoption of that screen. So essentially, the refreshed XT4 will only have been available for the 24 and the 25 model year. Luckily, I can count up to 2 very well. So that's 2 model years in my book that the XT4 will be available. 24 and 25. At that point, my question is this: why even bother with a freaking refresh? Why? Don't even bother with it. Just let the XT4 ride out. But I get it. They were not planning to discontinue it in the beginning, especially years ago when they started working and developing the refresh model. Discontinuing the XT4 this soon was not part of their product plan, right? But all of a sudden it is. So then the following question is, what's changed? What has changed for them to just say, okay, forget about the XT4. Let's just go full bore with the EV portfolio with the likes of the Optiq? I don't know. And it's a very strange decision to me, because now that we know who the next president will be, and obviously Trump, and we know that, the Trump admin's stance on EVs is not all that positive, right? It's not all that good. We might see things like the discontinuation of the $7,500 federal tax credit for EVs and a few other things that will essentially make it difficult for EVs to be affordable. They're already not affordable, right? They're already more expensive than their, internal combustion engine equivalents. Like the Optiq is, what, $10,000 to $15,000 more expensive than the XT4? Okay, so the $7,500 EV tax credit helps that. It does. It absolutely lessens the burden and lessens the pain of getting into an EV. But then you're still talking about roughly 10 grand, 7 to 10 grand, and not in favor of the Optiq.
For me, every time I see something that would inspire some sort of change, I normally tie it to some type of discomfort. Mm-hmm. I understand gas prices. When they're high, it's very, very difficult to, but if you're talking about much lower gas prices, that's a very interesting move if the market moves over to desiring internal combustion engines more, because they're, more accessible. It's cheaper to drive them around.
Right.
And you have an administration that is in favor of maintaining that as your status quo instead of moving into this whole EV space.
Right. Or maybe not even maintaining it as a status quo, specifically. Maybe it's just, not pushing people to where they might not want to go. But at the same time, right, we have that, and we just talked about this for the Optiq episode, on the Optiq episode rather. But at the same time, I have to say that the counterpoint to this is Tesla. And the Tesla is the dollar sign. It's the dollar signs in the eyes of execs, of automotive execs the world over, including GM, including Cadillac. I mean, what Tesla has done is, with EVs, from just a business standpoint, forget about, I'm not, everyone knows who listens to this show, I'm not a big fan of Tesla products. I really don't like them at all. For all kinds of reasons, right? I'm not going to get into them now, but I have my reasons. I don't like the product. Not that I don't like EVs. I just don't like Tesla EVs. I think the Lyriq is a much better EV than anything from Tesla.
Agreed.
And I know that I'm like a minority, and we're both minorities in this. We're gonna get the hate mail, like we did that one time when what was that, the Optiq episode? You should have seen the letters I got. Oh, it seems like you're triggered. Oh, I'm not triggered. I just don't like Tesla.
It's a much better offering in the sense of vehicle to vehicle. Mm-hmm. Strip the names, strip all that. What options am I getting here? What options am I getting here? How does it drive? How does it feel?
Right.
The reality is Tesla not only sells you a vehicle, they sell you an ideology. They sell you a feeling along with it.
Right. But the product sucks at the end of the day. The product rides hard. It's harsh. Okay, it looks like an egg. Unless you're getting the Model S, everything looks subpar. The Model 3 looks like crap. The Model Y looks like an undercooked egg. And the Model X looks like a little bigger, maybe dinosaur-style egg. It's just, whatever. The HMI, the human machine interface inside, pure garbage. You got to shift. You got to swipe your finger on the screen. I just said I'm not going to get into it. Why am I getting into it? Let me not get into it, because we're going to be here for hours. I have a list. All right. I have reasons why I don't like Tesla.
I've seen the list.
You've seen the list.
It's real.
It is.
The list is real.
I keep it under my pillow just in case, the tooth fairy tries to steal it. I'm going to rob her of all her money.
Then you can afford a Tesla.
Then I can buy one, right? So I have my reasons. But that's not to say that I don't like EVs. I like EVs. I appreciate and respect them. I don't think they're for everyone. But the question now becomes, with the discontinuation within the Cadillac portfolio of the XT4, so now the XT4 will be gone soon. You're going to have the Optiq. The XT5 is right on the cusp of getting discontinued. Now you're going to get the Lyriq. You already have the Lyriq. You're not going to get it. It's already been here. And the XT6 once the XT5 is gone, the XT6 is going to be right behind it, if not at the same time. And the XT6 will be replaced by the Vistiq. Great. So now the only Cadillac utility vehicle that still has an internal combustion engine powertrain in the North American market will be the Escalade at $100,000. So nothing affordable, right? I don't want to say affordable because we are talking about luxury cars, right? But there's nothing there. There's nothing there. So Cadillac has taken itself out of the market of mainstream luxury crossovers, period. And then that only leaves the only other internal combustion engine models in the portfolio are the CT4 and the CT5, which are also not really long for this world. As much as I like the CT4 and the CT5, they're one of my favorites ever, especially in the Blackwing, form factors. But they're not long for this world either. The Camaro, with which they shared a platform, is discontinued, and the plant where they're made, they're already making plans to convert it into an EV plant as well. And Cadillac has announced plans previously to be completely EV, to go to a complete EV only lineup by 2030. It was going to be the tip of the spear, as they called it, for Cadillac EV, for GM's EV transition. Well, since then they've rolled those plans back. Maybe not completely. Maybe it won't be exactly by 2030. Maybe but that was the big idea. That was the mantra was for Cadillac, we're gonna go into the 2021 and further, the calendar years, as a ICE only player, and we're gonna leave that decade as an EV only player. That was the strategy. That was the mantra. Well, I don't know. I don't know if that's such a good idea, because you read the comments, and you read the comments at Cadillac Society. You read it on Twitter. People are not ready. Actual people who are buying vehicles every single day are not ready for this transition.
Is it real that they are going a full EV switch, or is it that they're feeding ICE vehicles to a certain market because they're consuming them there at high numbers?
Well, they're consuming them here too.
Well, I understand
they want them here. There is demand.
So the idea that I want to be full EV by X date versus...
That's just foolish, though.
What does the market want?
Right.
Give them what they want.
Well, that's the question. And if you read the comments, I know that there are people who want EVs, but does everybody want EVs? To me, so. if I'm running a business and I'm selling burgers, I probably will want to offer at least one hot dog, right, in my lineup, because I know that not everyone wants a burger. Maybe I'll offer a chicken sandwich. Maybe I'll offer like a fish sandwich. But to say, okay, we're going to wage war. We're going to discontinue everything except for the tofu burger. No more hamburgers for you guys, which is what's been selling for the past 100 years, right? ICE vehicles have been the thing. I don't know. It seems to be a very aggressive, very, very aggressive undertaking. The other thing I'll note is that the XT4, I like the XT4 after it's been refreshed. I didn't hate it prior to the refresh. I just didn't think it was awesome. I think that the driving position was a bit awkward, the way the steering wheel, that the steering column kind of integrates into the cabin, makes it seem like it's a truck, even though it's not a truck. It's a car with a higher roofline. So I didn't hate it, but the XT4 in and of itself, just, taking away my personal subjective stuff, it was never a leader in its segment either. It's always been mid-pack. Like, for instance, the second quarter of 2024, it was the 7th most popular vehicle in its class out of a segment of 10. So it was towards the bottom end of the segment. Way ahead of it were the Lexus NX, the Acura RDX, the Buick Envision, which is the same platform as the XT4, but made in China and imported from China. That's the Buick Envision. The Audi Q3, the Lincoln Corsair, the BMW X1, and right there, right up in that space between the X1 and the Mercedes-Benz GLA resides the XT4, typically. Yeah, there's some months and quarters that it's higher, there's some months and quarters that it's lower, but typically it's, I think it's safe to say that it's never been a leader in the space. In fact, the year when it sold the most amount of units in the U.S. market was 2019. Essentially, the year that it the first full year on sale after it launched in July of 2018, and that was just shy of, it was 13 units shy of 32,000 sales.
I mean, I see the appeal to a point from Cadillac standpoint where maybe I'm not leading all these segments, but if I come up with a brand new EV line, maybe I can get into that top quarter of the conversation.
Well, that's exactly what it's about. I think you hit the nail on the head. Cadillac has, it's a very interesting vehicle, or just automotive brand in general, because it has very deep roots and very strong roots. But at some point, maybe in the 80s and definitely in the 90s, those roots were not strong whatsoever. They have become quite weak with product and with brand image. It got to a point where, Cadillac was the number one luxury automobile sold in the U.S. And it was the coveted luxury automobile of the U.S. market. That's not the case anymore. That's not the case. We did an episode years, or I don't know if it was years ago. No, we haven't been doing this for a year. We did an episode months ago about, BMW sales versus Cadillac sales. And BMW outsells Cadillac twofold, almost threefold in the U.S., in its home market. We don't even want to see what goes on in Europe. I mean, Cadillac is they're only now coming back, dipping their toe in the water into the European market, essentially into BMW's, Mercedes, and Audi's home turf with the Lyriq. So overall, the brand has really been, it was strong at some point through the 50s and 60s and 70s. And then in the 80s and 90s, it tapered off. It tapered off due to mismanagement, tapered off due to poor product, it tapered off due to really those two factors.
That and a ton of ego.
Oh, yeah. Well, that was the result. That was
like the biggest thing, where Cadillac was the brand to associate yourself with. If you had any type of upward movement in life, you wanted to have that as your status symbol, and it went away.
So what happened then is, the new GM needed to redo Cadillac. They were, if you look at every segment, with the exception of the Escalade, we went through this on that one episode that I'll link here as well. But, in every segment, they're outsold by BMW, by Mercedes, and Audi, almost in every segment, with the one exception, and that is the Escalade segment, the F luxury SUV. So this, coming back to what you said, this is a way for them to hit the reset button, to finally no longer be a follower. The XT4, let's be very clear about this. The XT4 was not a leading vehicle from a sales standpoint because it was not a leading vehicle in the overall product standpoint, from a product standpoint. What do I mean by that? Well, it was late to the party, right? The Audi Q3, the BMW X1, the Mercedes-Benz GLA class, those have all been around and were introduced in the U.S. market way before the XT4 was. And so Cadillac and GM as a whole were very late to the party. They missed the luxury crossover boat. They had the XT5, they had the SRX before that, and they had nothing else. It was SRX, Escalade. It was XT5, which replaced the SRX, and then Escalade. So you had a big gap below the XT5, and you had a big gap above the XT5, between the XT5 and the Escalade. Well, they introduced the XT4. They introduced it on, in my opinion, the wrong platform. It should have been based on the Alpha platform, just like the ATS of the era, just like the CT4 of today's era. It should have been built on a rear-wheel drive, proper sport chassis, proper dash-to-axle ratio, and it wasn't any of that. It was just a plebeian, it was a rebodied Chevy, right? It was a rebodied Malibu. Of course, they didn't just rebody it. It was quite a few things here and there that they did that made it better than just a Malibu. But at the end of the day, that's where it has its roots from. That's not a way to lead the market. That's not it. So at the end of the day, yes, I think that this is a way for Cadillac to stop playing catch up and say, okay, let's try with the likes of the Optiq, the Lyriq, and the Vistic, and the Escalade IQ. They don't really need much help on the Escalade IQ side, because the Escalade, like I said, it's already the best-selling model in its space. But with these models that are not the best-selling, or even close to being the best sellers of their segment, like the XT4, like the XT5, and XT6, let's just try something different entirely. And then one thing that's, I think, key to note as well is that for GM, and the way that they planned their entire EV rollout, their entire EV onslaught, if you will, the way that they planned it, it is planned to be much more profitable for GM to sell EVs of this generation, the ones that are built on the latest generation Ultium plus BEV3 or BT1 platforms. It's much more profitable to do those than to do internal combustion engine models. So that combination of start over, reset button, plus promises of higher profitability, I think that is the key reason why they're moving in this direction, and they're moving in this direction so aggressively.
It makes sense. I mean, they've been using China and the Chinese market for a while as a safety net in terms of they've developed these vehicles before. They spent the money already. They're out there. They're selling. They're buying them, manufacturing them over there. They've got some really good agreements with the government where, they can manufacture, they can do.
And it's simpler to do it there. It's simpler to do any kind of assembly, manufacturing, production, what have you. You don't have the red tape that you get here. You don't have the unions. You don't have the logistics issues that you have here. Everything is just a lot simpler to make in China. So, and less expensive. It was a low-cost market before, China was. It's no longer a low-cost market, but it still is less expensive to manufacture there, and it still is simpler to manufacture there than it is here in the U.S. and also in Canada.
It was like a good move on Cadillac point. It's just, let's see how their bets pay out at the end.
Yeah, let's see how it plays out, because I'd be curious. I mean, I would love to be, wrong on this. I wish that the Optiq would, I wish that it becomes a massive sales success. I wish the same thing for the Lyriq and the Vistic and every one of their EV efforts.
I like it. Their portfolio.
I just don't know if everyone's going to jump on board.
If the prices were a little bit closer to that, internal combustion engine range, we'd be having a very serious conversation. At this point, maybe we're not there yet, but hopefully soon. Yeah. We'll see.
Yep.
Alrighty. Thank you all for joining us on the 18th episode of the Cadillac Society Podcast. You can find this show at cadillacsociety.com/podcast and on the Metrolix Network YouTube channel. Please remember to hit that like button and give us a follow or subscribe. We're also on your favorite podcatchers, so be sure to subscribe and leave a review there. If you would like us to discuss something specific, you can now suggest a topic by going to cadillacsociety.com/podcast. And as we mentioned earlier, if you enjoyed this show, please share it, tweet it, put it on Facebook, send the YouTube link to your friends. The more people that know about the Cadillac Society Podcast, the merrier. And please remember to stay tuned for our 19th episode next week. In the meantime, be sure to visit cadillacsociety.com.
Motrolix.